A woman is crying in a service corridor on the fourth floor of a luxury hotel in Denver, pressed into the narrow space between a linen cart and the wall, trying to make herself small enough that nobody will see. She is failing. People see. They just don't stop. The first one walks past at 7:14 in the evening. A bellman in a hurry, eyes forward. Already gone. Then, two line cooks taking a shortcut to the service elevator, talking about the gala upstairs, who step around the cart and around her without breaking the conversation. Then a front desk supervisor with a clipboard. Then a banquet captain. Then a florist's assistant carrying an armful of white roses for the ballroom 6 floors up, who glances at the crying woman for exactly 1 second and decides the roses are more urgent. Count them. Because somebody should. 1, 5, 11, 20. A houseman. A concierge. A sommelier. A second bellman. 29. 33. Each one busy. Each one with somewhere to be. Each one telling themselves the same quiet thing every single one of us tells ourselves in a hallway like that. Somebody else will handle it. It's not my place. I don't have time. I don't want to make it worse. 37 people walked past Gloria Mendez crying in that corridor between 7:14 and 7:31 on a Friday night. The 38th person stopped. He came through the service door in a plain dark suit. A man who'd slipped out of the glittering thing upstairs to find a quiet way down, and he saw a woman crying against a wall. And he did the one thing that 37 people in a row had found a reason not to do. He stopped walking. He crouched down. And he said, "Hey, what's happened? Talk to me." This is the story of what that one decision set loose. It's the story of Roland Pike, a manager who had spent 11 years saying no for a reason he had never told a living soul. And it's the story of the simplest, cheapest, hardest thing a person can do for another person, which is to be the one who stops. Stay with me. The reason all of this matters is not the reason you think, and it lands at the very end. There is a hotel in downtown Denver called the Belmont Grand. 22 floors of marble and brass and quiet money. A lobby with a fountain in it and a doorman who remembers your name. The kind of place where a glass of wine costs what a housekeeper makes in an hour, and nobody who orders it ever thinks about that for even a second. On the night this happened, the Belmont Grand's Grand Ballroom held the largest charity gala of the year. 800 guests. Chandeliers the size of cars. A silent auction with a sailboat in it. Upstairs, on the 21st floor, the city's wealthiest people were eating duck and writing checks for children they would never meet, and the whole shimmering machine of it. The duck, the wine, the spotless glasses, the folded napkins, the clean rooms the guests would stumble back to, was being run, invisibly, by a small army of people the guests would never see. That is the thing about a hotel. There are 2 of them, stacked into the same building. There is the hotel the guests walk through, all marble and light, and behind every wall of it there is the other one, the narrow gray service corridors, the unpainted concrete, the linen carts, the freight elevators, the people in uniforms moving fast and silent so the first hotel can pretend the second one doesn't exist. A guest can stay a week at the Belmont Grand and never once see the corridor where Gloria Mendez was crying. That's the design. That's what they're paying for. Gloria Mendez was 58 years old and had cleaned rooms at the Belmont Grand for 19 years. She knew which guests tipped and which ones stole the robes. She knew how to make a bed so tight you could bounce a coin off it. She had raised 2 kids on this job, alone after their father left, and the younger one, Hector, 17, a junior in high school. The joy of her whole hard life was the reason she'd taken every double shift she could get for the last decade. At 6:40 that evening, in the middle of her shift, with the gala ramping up 6 floors above her, Gloria Mendez's phone had buzzed in her apron pocket. And the voice on the other end told her that Hector had been in a car accident on Highway 36, that he was at St. Anthony's, that he was in surgery, that she should come now. That is why she was crying in the corridor. Not because anyone had been cruel to her, because her son was in an operating room across the city, and she was standing in a gray hallway in an apron, and the man whose job it was to let her go had told her she could not. Roland Pike was 56 years old and was the operations manager of the Belmont Grand, and he was, by every measure the hotel cared about, excellent at his job. He ran a tight house. He hit his labor numbers. He did not make exceptions, did not bend the schedule, did not let the soft stuff get in the way of the operation, and in 11 years he had never once been written up for being too lenient. The staff found him cold. They were not wrong, exactly, but they were wrong about why. Because there had been another Roland Pike a long time ago, before the cold one. A young assistant manager at a different hotel in a different city, 29 years old, with a mother dying of cancer in a hospice 40 minutes away. And one night, near the end, the hospice had called him at work. Come now. It won't be long, and Roland had gone to his manager, a man named Ostrowski, and asked to leave. And Ostrowski had looked at the full house, and the short staff, and the convention checking in at 6 a.m., and he had said no. Policy, notice required. If you walk out mid-shift, don't bother coming back. Roland Pike was 29 years old, and he needed the job, and his mother had raised him to never lose a job. And he stood in that hallway, and he made the worst decision of his life. He stayed. He worked the overnight. And his mother died at 4:50 in the morning while he was checking in a tour group from Minneapolis. And he was not there. And the last thing he ever said to her had been said over the phone 3 days before. And he never, ever got it back. He did not fall apart. That was the terrible thing. He did the opposite. He took the unbearable grief and the unbearable shame of the choice he'd made, and he buried it so deep that the only way to keep it buried was to believe, with his whole frozen heart, that he'd had no choice, that the rules are the rules, that the job is the job and feelings are a luxury and nobody gets special treatment, because if anybody got it, if mercy was even possible, then it had been possible for him too, on the worst night of his life, and he could not survive knowing that. So, he made it impossible. For everyone. For 11 years, when Gloria Mendez came to him at 6:48 with her face white and her phone shaking in her hand and said, "My son, he's in surgery, I have to go," Roland Pike did not hear a mother. He heard the request he had made to Ostrowski 27 years before. And he gave her the only answer his frozen heart had ever been able to live with. "We're at minimum staff for the gala," he said. "I can't release you mid-shift. If you leave, I have to treat it as walking off the job. I'm sorry. Those are the rules." He even believed the "I'm sorry." That was the saddest part. He had said it to himself in the mirror for 27 years. So, Gloria went back to her cart. She tried to work. She got one room done with her hands shaking too hard to fold the towels right. And then the second call came. Hector was out of surgery. It was bad. They didn't know yet. And Gloria Mendez made it as far as the service corridor on 4 before her legs stopped holding her up, and she sank down against the wall between the linen cart and the concrete, and she broke. And then the hallway happened. The 37. I want to be careful here. because it would be easy to make them monsters, and they weren't. They were us. The bellman at 7:14 had a guest waiting and a manager already on his back about response times. The line cooks were 90 seconds behind on a plated dinner for 800. The florist's assistant was 20 years old and terrified of doing her first big event wrong. The front desk supervisor genuinely thought, in the half second she allowed herself to think about it, that someone closer would handle it. Not one of them woke up that morning intending to walk past a weeping woman. They were just busy and afraid and certain it wasn't their place, and running on the autopilot that lets all of us move through the world without having to stop for every hard thing in it. One of them, number 31, a 20-year-old room service runner named Eli Brooks, actually slowed down. He saw her, and something in his chest pulled at him, and he almost stopped. And then his radio crackled with an order for 1900, and he told himself he'd check on her on the way back. And he went. And we all know what "I'll check on the way back" is worth. It is worth nothing. It is the most common lie in the human language. 37 times, the corridor stayed a place where Gloria Mendez cried, alone. And then a service door opened, and a man in a plain dark suit who had slipped out of the gala because he could not stand one more handshake came down the gray corridor looking for the freight elevator, and he saw her, and he stopped. He didn't tower over her. He crouched down to her level, against the opposite wall, so they were eye to eye. Two people on the floor of a service corridor. "Hey," he said, "talk to me, what's happened?" And maybe it was that he was the first one who'd asked. Maybe it was that he wasn't in a Belmont Grand uniform, so it felt safe. But Gloria Mendez looked at this stranger, and the whole thing came out of her in a flood. Hector. The highway. The surgery. The call. The manager. The rules. The apron she couldn't take off. The sun she couldn't get to. The man listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush her. He just stayed down there on the floor with her until she got to the end of it. "What's your son's name?" he asked. "Hector." She could barely say it. "He's 17. And they told you can't leave. If I leave, I lose the job. And if I lose the job, I can't pay the." She pressed her hand over her mouth. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to, Gloria." He'd seen the name on her tag. "You're going to your son. Right now. Tonight, I promise you that. The rest of it. The job, the hospital, all of it. None of that is going to be a problem. I need you to believe me for about 10 minutes while I go handle one thing. Can you do that?" She didn't know who he was. She nodded anyway, because he was the first person in 17 minutes who had looked at her like she was a person and not an inconvenience in a hallway. The man stood up, and a young room service runner came around the corner with an empty tray. Eli Brooks, number 31, coming back the way he'd promised himself he would. Too late to be first, but not too late to be something. And he stopped dead, and his face crumpled, because he saw the man-crouched stranger now standing, and he saw Gloria, and he understood in one sick rush that he had walked past this 15 minutes ago, and kept going. "Sit with her," the man said to Eli, not unkindly. "Don't leave her alone. I'll be right back." And Eli Brooks sank down next to Gloria Mendez, and finally, 15 minutes late, did the thing he should have done the first time. He stayed. The man in the dark suit went to find Roland Pike. He found him in the operations office off the back of house, and he closed the door, and Roland Pike looked up from his labor reports at a guest who was not supposed to be back here, and started to say so. "You denied a housekeeper's request to go to her son in the hospital tonight," the man said. Quiet, not loud. "I'd like to understand why." Pike's jaw set into its 11-year groove. "Sir, with respect, our staffing is not a guest matter. We're at minimum coverage for an 800-person event. I can't release staff mid-shift. It's policy, and I don't know who." "He's 17, the man said. "He's out of surgery, and they don't know if he's going to make it. And his mother is sitting on the floor of your service corridor in an apron because you told her the gala matters more." He paused. "I just need to know if you actually believe that the gala matters more. Because I don't think you do. I think it's just easier to say than whatever the real thing is." Roland Pike opened his mouth to say those are the rules. And for the first time in 11 years, the words would not come out, because the man was looking at him the way no one had looked at him in 27 years. Not angry, not even disappointed, just seeing him. And the wall Roland Pike had built around the worst night of his life developed. In that moment, a crack he could not stop. "Give me 5 minutes with you," the man said. "Just you and me. Then I'll go and you can do whatever you want. But 5 minutes first." He sat down across the desk from Roland Pike. He didn't loom. He waited. "You don't know anything about me," Pike said. But it came out as barely a whisper. "No," the man said. "But I think I know one thing. I think somebody, a long time ago, said no to you when you needed to be somewhere. And I think you've spent every year since making sure you'd never have to feel like the exception you didn't get. Because if she gets to go tonight," he nodded toward the corridor, toward Gloria, "then you could have gone too, that time, whenever it was. And that's the one thing you can't let yourself know." Roland Pike's face came apart. He told him. He told a stranger in a dark suit the thing he had never told his wife, his kids, anyone, about Ostrowski and the hospice and the no, about the tour group from Minneapolis in 4:50 in the morning, about the phone call 3 days before that turned out to be the last words, about 27 years of saying those are the rules, because the alternative was admitting what the rules had cost him. The man listened to all of it. And when Pike was done, he said something quietly. "I got the opposite once," he said. "Before any of this, when I was nobody, I got a call that someone I loved was dying, and the man I worked for took one look at me and said, 'Go. I'll cover it. Just go.' And I made it. I made it in time, because somebody chose to be a person instead of a manager for one night. He let that sit. That's the only difference between you and me, Roland. Not character. Not strength, just which kind of boss we happen to get on the worst night of our lives. You got Ostrowski. I got a good man. And I have spent the rest of my life trying to be the good man for somebody else, because I know exactly how close I came to being you." He leaned forward. "Gloria's got a Hector in an operating room right now. You can't go back and save your mother, but you are about 10 feet and one decision away from making sure another kid's mother gets the thing you didn't. That's not nothing, Roland. That might be the whole point of everything that happened to you." Roland Pike put his face in his hands and wept, in his own office, 27 years late. "Go tell her she can leave," the man said, standing. "And then, if you've got it in you, go further than that. Go be the reason nobody in this building ever sits on that floor alone again." He opened the door. "Your mother would know you by that. Better than by anything on that labor report." Roland Pike came out of his office a different man than the one who'd gone in. The first thing he did was walk to the service corridor, where Eli Brooks sat on the floor next to Gloria Mendez, and he crouched down. Roland Pike, who never crouched, in his pressed manager's suit, on the concrete. And he took Gloria's hand. "Go to your son," he said, and his voice was not the flat voice. It was a voice nobody at the Belmont Grand had ever heard him use. "Right now. Your job is safe I'll put it in writing tonight if you want it. Take whatever time you need. And Gloria, I am so sorry. I should have said yes the second you asked me. I, of all the people in this building, should have said yes. But Gloria didn't have a car at the hotel. And St. Anthony's was across the city. And that was when the man in the dark suit, who had spent the 5 minutes before this on the phone, said there was a car at the service entrance already running, and that it would take her straight to the hospital, and that someone would make sure the parking and the paperwork and the things you can't think about when your child is in danger were simply handled so she could think about nothing but Hector. It was Eli Brooks, 20 years old, who started crying first, still sitting on the floor. And then he scrambled up and grabbed the linen cart out of Gloria's way and walked her to the elevator himself, talking to her the whole way. The way you talk to someone so they don't have to be alone with the fear. Roland Pike watched them go with his hand still warm from hers. The man in the dark suit watched too, from the end of the corridor. And when Gloria was in the car and the car was gone, he caught Roland Pike's eye, and he smiled. The real one, the crooked, unhurried one. He didn't say anything else. He went back up to the gala for exactly long enough not to be missed. And then he left, and most of the 800 people upstairs never knew that the most important thing that happened at the Belmont Grand that night happened in a gray corridor they would have paid good money never to see. Only later did Roland Pike learn the man's name. Cole Hartley. He'd been guest number 400 and something at a gala for 800, and he'd been the 38th person to walk down that hallway. Here's the part that matters. The car and the covered bills were the easy part. The easy part is always the part with a price tag. Hector Mendez lived. It was a long road, 3 weeks in the hospital, months of rehab, a metal plate in his leg he'll set off airport scanners with for the rest of his life. But he lived, and his mother was there for every hour of it because the bills simply never came, and the job was simply always there, and a man she'd met on the floor of a corridor had made sure that the only thing she ever had to carry was her son. She still doesn't fully know who paid. She has her guesses. She lights a candle for him anyway, the man with no name, every Sunday. But the slower change, the one that took years, happened to Roland Pike. It had not become a soft man overnight, because 27 years of frozen grief does not thaw in one weeping afternoon in an office. But he started. The first thing he did, within a week, was write a new policy for the Belmont Grand, a real one, in plain language, that gave every employee the unconditional right to leave for a family medical emergency. No notice, no questions, job guaranteed, with a fund attached to help cover what a missed shift might cost them. He fought the ownership group for it. He won, because for the first time in his career he was willing to quit over something, and they could tell. He never told anyone what the policy was really about. But he filed it under a name in the internal system that meant nothing to anyone else. The Helen provision. Helen had been his mother's name. And he became, of all things, the manager the staff went to when something was wrong at home. The cold one. The rules one. Word got around, the way it does, that if your kid was sick, or your mother was dying, or your world was falling apart, Roland Pike was the one who'd find the coverage and tell you to go. He had spent 11 years making sure mercy was impossible. He spent the rest of his career making sure it was the rule. Eli Brooks, number 31, the kid who came back too late and stayed anyway, Roland Pike took under his wing. Promoted him, mentored him, told him the whole story once. The only person he ever told the full version to. Because he wanted the kid to understand what the stakes of a hallway really are. Eli's a manager himself now, at a hotel in another city. He keeps a card in his wallet, in his own handwriting. The lesson he took from the worst 15 minutes of his young life. The 15 minutes he walked past. It says, "I'll check on the way back" is worth nothing. Stop the first time. Years later, a reporter asked Cole Hartley about it, the version that had leaked out, the famous man and the housekeeper in the hallway. People expected him to talk about the car, the bills, the policy, the things money did. He didn't. "I didn't do anything 37 other people couldn't have done," he said. "I just happened to be the one who stopped walking." That's all it ever takes. It's not money, and it's not fame. It's stopping. Anybody in that hallway could have been 38. I just got there at the right time. I've told a lot of these stories on this channel. This is the one I keep coming back to, and for once it's not because of the antagonist, though God knows I feel for Roland Pike. It's because of the 37. It would be easy to make them the villains. 37 people who walked past a weeping woman like she was a piece of furniture. But I can't do it. And I'll tell you why. Because I am the 37. So are you. Every one of us has walked past somebody in some hallway, slowed down, felt the pull, told ourselves we'd check on the way back, and kept going. The bellman wasn't a monster. He had a guest waiting. The florist was 20 and scared. They were busy and afraid, and certain it wasn't their place, which is exactly what I am, most days. When I walk past the hard thing, because I've got somewhere to be. The man in the dark suit was right. And it's the most uncomfortable thing in this whole story. He didn't do something the other 37 couldn't have done. He didn't write a check in that corridor. He didn't pull rank. He crouched down on a concrete floor and said, "Talk to me." That's free. That's available to every single one of us, in every hallway we'll ever walk down. The only thing that made him the hero of this story instead of the bellman is that he stopped walking. I don't know how many hallways I've walked through. I'd like to think I'd be 38. But honestly, the math is not in my favor. Or yours. Most of us are somewhere in the 37. Most of the time. And maybe that's the thing I keep turning over, not be a hero, but something much smaller and much harder. The next crying person in the next gray hallway. Don't be 37. It costs you nothing but the time, and it might be the whole world to them. This story is fictional, inspired by the kind of person we'd all like to be. The one who stops the first time. If something in it landed for you, drop a comment and tell me about a time someone stopped for you, or a time you wish you had. I read them, and the quiet ones say the most. If you know someone who's been walking past their own grief for a long time the way Roland did, share it with them. It might be the thing they needed tonight. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. There's another one coming, and I think you'll want to be here for it. See you in the next one.